Hi, people. Thank you for stopping by Building Wealth with Rajiv. If you're looking for next 10 baggers or 100 baggers, you may want to look at small companies. Here's my chat with Bill Mann, who joined me from USA, Motley Fool. He specializes in picking great small cap stocks. Bill was kind enough to lay down a very clear blueprint for small cap investments. He named some of his favorite picks. He also talked about the right investing mindset to succeed in small cap investments. I hope you like the content. If you like it, please follow the channel, share with your friends, also write your comments. They mean a lot to me.
I spent a lot of time thinking about where people are not really thinking about where the next inputs are coming from. Like, so for example, a lot of money has been made and a lot of money has been lost over the last 2 years. People trying to figure out what the next Tesla is.
Yeah.
Right. So we had Nikola in this country, which I'm afraid was, the next best thing to a complete fraud. We have Lordstown, a number of companies like that. So I spend time thinking, okay, why are we trying to pick winners there? Why are we not just buying copper companies? Because every country in the world, it seems, has a mandate for electric vehicles. I believe Singapore
Tesla
has put a
now.
plan together as well. There's a plan.
Yeah, the Tesla just opened here about a month ago.
Yeah. So why not look for the lowest cost production copper companies in the world? Because copper is an enormous input that goes into the batteries, and they aren't competing on technology, they're just competing on cost. So I am actually very interested in some of the input companies that go into things that are completely thematic. A company like TECK Resources, which is based in Canada, they have massive mines. They have incredibly low cost copper because of the other metals that are also present in their mines. So that's an area that I've been very interested in.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? What makes you passionate about the company? What are they? Is the founders, or is it the product, or is it
Well, so it's primarily it's pretty simple. It's a Canadian mining company, so it mines a couple of things. The thing that it was most known for was for zinc, but it's also a major copper producer. Copper is completely vital for the electrification of transportation. I mean, it's a pretty big company.
Okay.
It's I'm sorry, I have that. So it's about $20 billion market cap in the
Okay. Oh, that's big. Okay.
Yeah, it's big. It's a big company, which in the mining space you actually want, because they generally, even with the low cost, with the lowest cost producers, they are price takers. And as you know, with every commodity and every commodity provider, it's a boom and bust,
okay.
right? Like there are. You are completely dependent on supply and demand. They've had a long time. Their management has been in place for decades. They are the CEO is named Don Lindsay. He's been there since 2005. So it's hard to really go super deep into what you like about straight resource companies.
Okay.
But to me, it is both that macro of what is coming throughout, in the electrification of much of our transportation around the world, and then looking for the low cost producer that provides the materials for it.
And you kind of what's your I totally get your thesis. Is it you kind of think that it possibly can outperform the market?
I think so. I think so, and I think it will do so. I think it will do so in a lower risk way. And Rajiv, it probably goes. It bears a little bit of discussion about what we consider to be risk. We at the Motley Fool, because we are such long-term investors,
we don't
really think of risk as being the same thing as in academia, where they think of risk as being volatility. And they have to do the same with most institutional investors. Believe that risk equals volatility. We expect with a commodity company that there's going to be a fair amount of volatility. I think what I'm talking about when I talk about risk is the risk of the permanent loss of capital.
Okay.
And with a company like TECK, if you look, if you look at the numbers, it's trading at a rather rich PE of nearly 90.
All right.
But on a cash basis, because they have such huge depreciation costs that are non-cash, and it's on a cash basis, this is a really profitable company. And I think it's going to be more so as the demand for copper increases.
Okay. So it falls in that commodity space, isn't it?
Yeah.
It falls in the commodity
exactly.
space.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's great. I think this fantastic. And I know you're kind of you're very deep into the small cap. Any other small cap you have in mind? You think that investors could be aware of and could take benefit of?
So one of my favorite companies in the small cap space, it's actually an English company, though it does about 90% of its business here in the US, and is called Naked Wines.
Wow, that's glamorous.
Yeah. Well, it's naked, right? So that's good. It's based in the UK in a town called Norwich, and I love situations like this, Rajiv. So there was a set of retail wine cellars in the UK. It still exists, called Majestic Wine. And it was it was like your local bottle shop. You go in, you get a cab, whatever, and so they figured out about 10 years ago that they had an opportunity to go and sell wine online. That the laws had changed somewhat, and so what they did that I think is really neat, and it worked out super well during the COVID shutdown, is they would go to vineyards and they would say, "We will buy an entire vintage of your wine, so you get the money for it now." Okay. So you don't have so what they're encouraging the vineyards to do. There's a tension that happens in vineyards, that the time in which it is optimal to harvest the grapes sometimes is longer than their ability to withstand the cash flow, the cash flow dynamics of the business. So right before the grapes are picked and they start producing wine, they start producing wine from them, these companies are running on fumes. The vineyards are. So what Naked Wines has done is said, okay, look, we're going to guarantee purchase of this entire vintage. So it won't be available anywhere else. So we're going to pay you in advance, and we want you to produce it in an optimal way. Okay. Right. You don't have to worry anymore about the economics about, when you pick the grapes. You are picking the grapes now as a viticulturist, right? Like you are to optimize. So the consumer benefits because they're getting they're getting a lower cost wine that's very high quality. The vineyards are benefiting, and Naked Wines has done very, very well. It's growing at about 25%. Most of their sales are in the US. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me. It's listed in the UK now, although you can buy shares on the OTC market in the US. It would not surprise me if Naked Wines relisted into the United States at some point, just because so much of their business is here. Yeah.
Look, I drink wine, but I don't know so much about the.
So you're pro wine. That's good. Who amongst us?
No, I don't know about the business because I've been to a lot of winery. Whenever I go to winery tours, and they $100, they give so much of free wine and all that I drink. What is the USP? What's the point of differentiation of this particular company? Like, I'm sure there are other wine companies as well.
There are, but Naked Wines is actually, in fact, there are also other. We call it wine as a service. So there are other wine as a service companies, but Naked Wines has by far the best brand. It was a first mover. They have a very young new CEO, a man named Nick Devlin. The founder, the founder of the company turned things over, to Nick in 2019. Do you find, by the way, I keep wanting to call 2019 last year, right? Last year was 2019. 2020 didn't exist, right? 2020 is the troubles. 2019 is last year. So in 2019, Nick Devlin took over, young guy, early 40s, and has just a great sense for where he wants this business to go. Yeah. So it's very similar to a Netflix or very similar to an Amazon pretty early on, in that there aren't barriers to entry, but there are very much barriers to competing with the largest player. And Naked Wines has a beautiful brand name. Their advertising here in the United States is spectacular. They are the first mover, and they have that advantage. And what they've done is that they are locking up vineyards for multiple years. The vineyards are delighted to work with Naked Wines. So they're coming back. And so the relationship that they have, and that what you call a flywheel, which I think is a pretty overused term.
No. Roku is a flywheel. Twilio is a flywheel.
Yeah. In fact, while I was talking, I was like, can I think of another one? But I'm going to have to go with flywheel here because that's what it is. And so if you think about like the relationship that Costco has with its suppliers, where they know that Costco is not going to chisel them for the last penny. Naked Wines is doing the same thing. They want a healthy environment.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're comfortable with the valuations. And I know we play a long-term game here, a decade-long game, but you're good with other measures. And
yeah, I'm quite comfortable. I'm quite comfortable with the valuation. It's about a $600 million US company.
Okay.
In market cap. They've got plenty of cash on the balance sheet. They're at a price to sales of less than 2.
That sounds like a bargain, especially when you
relative to so obviously they've got huge capital investments that they're making now. So it's not a profitable company. But I think so many people, I mean, obviously there are a couple of publicly traded vineyards and wine companies out there. There's Treasury Wine Estates in Australia. There's Conchitoro in Chile. They aren't great companies. Not that they're not great companies, but wine is a hard business.
It's a very hard business, and
it's a very hard business. They say if you want to be a millionaire, start as a billionaire and open a vineyard, right? Like so, it's a tough business.
It's a tough business,
to really make a go of it. So I think a lot of people remain skeptical of companies that are in this segment. But
I think Bill, I traveled to Perth and. There were a lot of businesses for sale, and the most businesses for sale were wineries.
Yeah.
So difficult to handle.
Right. It's enormous upfront capital. Enormous upfront capital. You have, of course, there's insurance for it, but the insurance is expensive. You've got a lot of risk of what they call bio risk. What if your crop fails? Which happens.
But despite that, you are bullish on this?
Well, sure, because they're not tied into any one vineyard. They're not tied into any one region. If Chile has a bad year, they can offer Argentine wines, and so every month You have an offering of the wines that are available, and you can choose. You can get a white, you can get a cab, you can get a Carmenere, any kind of wine that you would like. So they do not have that biological risk that the vineyards do, and
Right.
yeah, so it's enormous returns on capital. Again, the capital investments that they're making now for growth are big, but I think that this company will be a long-term winner.
All right. That's really great. Do you want to throw one more name? And I think that should be enough on small caps, or?
So another company that I think very highly of, and this is maybe the opposite end of the spectrum as it comes to expense or cheapness, is a Norwegian company called Kahoot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
is this the voting company, is it?
Yes, the voting company, the EduTech company. They very recently, so the company's been around since 2013. They just started commercial. They just started making money off of their technology in 2018. Prior to that, they just they were self-funded, and but it's growing like wildfire. They're growing at 150%. Obviously benefited quite deeply from the shutdown as students everywhere went into remote learning. This was very helpful. The stock has been hammered in 2021. I think as a result of people believing that Kahoot was a COVID play, but I don't think it is. And one of the reasons I don't think it is I'm watching some of the, I'm watching some of the partnerships that Kahoot is forming. They've got a partnership with Oxford University. They have a partnership with Disney. They have a partnership with National Geographic. They have partnerships with the Discovery networks, all of whom could conceivably put out their own quiz, their own quiz shows. I mean, their own technology. But because there are 2 billion people who are already using Kahoot, they're using that as the default. So this is a high risk company. It's a very high risk company. But I'm watching some of the some of the elements of what Kahoot is doing, and it reminds me of Netflix. It reminds me of Facebook, where it becomes the default. And I'm not saying that Kahoot's going to become Facebook. That would be incredible. But what I am saying is that within this segment, they are getting to the point, and I think they will succeed. But though I think that there's going to be some bumps and bruises along the way, as is the case with every single company, that is trying to do something that hasn't been done before. I think they are set up for long-term just dominance in the edutech segment.
But this is look. I used Kahoot 2 days before. I used Kahoot 3 days before, because I was on Zoom call, and then they say, "Oh, these are the options," and then you have to vote. So everybody was voting
through your business, correct?
Yeah, it's my business.
Yeah.
It's very. But there is no entry barriers there, right? I mean, anybody can create a Kahoot, isn't it? But the brand name is different,
thing, right? Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Well, anyone can create. There's no. I look at Kahoot and I don't see any technological barriers to entry. What I do see is an ecological barrier to entry. And this is what's important about watching the signals for you. I mean, if you don't think that Disney could put up their own competing technology in an hour, you're crazy. But they haven't. They've chosen to go to Kahoot. And the reason why they've chosen to go to Kahoot is they know that there are already 1 billion people using Kahoot. They know that they're already on the platform. And then, so rather than trying to invent their own thing, they've just simply partnered with Kahoot. So they get access to that massive audience that's already there on that platform.
What's the
Those are the
optionality for
types
the
of
business?
signals that I'm looking at, Rajiv.
No, it's okay. What's the optionality for the business? I mean, is it that they're looking to kind of horizontally grow somewhere?
Well, so some of their optionality has been in the form of add-on, and they have been very much in the model of buying additional add-ons. So this last year, they bought a company called Drops. I don't know if you're familiar with Drops, but it's very similar to a Duolingo in which it teaches you it's language instruction. They also bought a company called Whiteboard, which is a log on and tracking system for educators, like a single log on to give you all of your technology suite, and so that's Kahoot is being embedded into that. So the optionality there for them is really, it's been up until now, it's been primarily in education. But as you just said, in the form that you used it, they've got 497 of the 500 S&P 500 companies who have used or are using Kahoot in a corporate training basis. So they've got HR applications, they've got corporate training applications. So those are the optionalities.
And they've been growing quite well.
Yeah, I mean, they're growing, again, from a very, very low base. I mean, they're only up to about, on a run rate, they'll hit about $100 million in revenue this year. So from a very low base, that's what it was important to mention, that they've only started, charging for their services.
Yeah. I think sounds very exciting. So, Bill, I divide my $10,000 among these three companies. 3,300, 3,300.
It's going to be exciting. I mean, that's going to be an exciting portfolio.
Okay. Maybe I'll choose my battles. I'll put 50%. That's right. Put 50% on a Facebook and Google.
That's right. Yeah. I would really prefer that people not split their money across those three companies and then assume that they've got a diversified, low wattage portfolio, because what I've just described is, so the copper company, I think there's your basis. There's your, if you think about building a portfolio where you've got, where you're diversified, you've got kind of the sure, the company that like 3, 4, 5 years from now is kind of going to be in the same place in tech resources. You've got the company that's got certain amounts of optionality in Naked Wines. And then you've got the one that could be 100 bagger and could be gone in Kahoot. Yeah. So if that's if that sounds exciting to you, then I think that's great.
Well, that brings me another question, Bill. How to live with the small caps? How to live with the small cap investing? I mean, look, 100 baggers, 10 baggers, and you're so experienced, Bill, compared to me also. But it's easy to say, but living with those is not easy. It's years.
It's not easy.
Yeah. So how to live with that? And what do you suggest? Like,
ultimately, I think that I think so much of this, Rajiv, comes to understanding who you are, right? Okay. And the best time at the Motley Fool, we always we encourage people to keep journals. Okay. Right? And there are two really, really important times to journal. The first of which is you always write something down. It doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to come up with a 15-page thesis, but right before you transact in anything, write down why you're transacting. Write down what you think is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Right. And 50 words, it doesn't matter, but you have to do it before you buy or before you sell. And the reason why that is that our minds are really amazing at tricking us about what we knew or should have known. Mm-hmm. Right. Think about, and there are people, and David Gardner is one of them, who bought Amazon in 1998 and 1999. And they've had an incredible ride. But if you were to go back and look at their journals in 1999, do you think they mentioned AWS? Do you think they mentioned, Blue Azure? No, they didn't. They mentioned a pretty cool little bookseller.
Right? I don't think even Jeff Bezos knew about AWS.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
No, of course not. All he knew was that he was putting together a platform that was going to allow him to do different things. So that's one time that it's really important to write things down. The other time to write things down is at a period of time in which the market terrifies you. Right? We saw it last March, and it has to be during those times in which it doesn't have to be the market. It can be your portfolio. If it terrifies you, if you write down how you feel right then you know what your risk tolerance is. You know what your emotional capacity to handle loss is, right? And you can't manufacture that any other time. Right. So if the market's going great, it's impossible for you to manufacture that feeling of fear.
Yeah. And I think it's also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, also I think it's the way you said about volatility. Volatility is how you look at volatility. I mean, I read a good thing. Volatility is the price you pay for delta.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Volatility is where bargains come from.
Yeah.
Full stop. If the market was not volatile, the market would not offer potential, right? There's a gosh, what's the guy's name? Joel Greenblatt, excuse me. Joel Greenblatt very famously said, the reason why my investing process works is because my investing process doesn't always work. Right? If it worked all of the time, someone would figure it out and crack it, and they would put, and they would just be automated so they don't have to think about it. So the reason why certain types of investing work better than others, because they don't always work. And a lot of people can't handle that. And really specifically, a lot of institutions and their institutional clients cannot handle having a portfolio that is moving orthogonally from the market, but in a negative way when the market is doing something else. They cannot take that under, even very short periods of time. So I think those are really important principles, especially for people who are investing in small caps. The other thing is, if you look at the market, the longer you go, the higher likelihood that in the United States, at least, and I know that the United States has the best performing stock market of any in the world over the last 10 and 20 years. Undoubtedly true.
Yeah.
But in the US, at least, and I think this is true in a lot of places, though. I think it's true in Singapore. I know it's not true in Japan, but if you go any 5-year period, anyone, and I mean things like from March 1st, 1995 to March 1st, 2000, any single period, 90% of the time, the stock market is higher 5 years than it was before.
Yep.
The shorter you go, the less true that is. Now, so the reality for, the reality for us is that when we are thinking about small caps in particular, we've got a couple of things in our mind. That one, your portfolio is not a report card like the one that you have in school, so our grading system here in the US is A through F, right? A is, A, you've done great. F, you've done terribly.
I thought it was the other way.
What's that?
I thought it was the other way.
No. I mean, that's what my dad told me, at least, right?
Okay.
I never got any A's, so I don't really know.
Okay.
So when a child brings home a report card and their marks are A, D, F, that's a terrible report card, right? But in stocks, it's not the same way because we have super A's. you can have a portfolio that looks like A, F, 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 F. And if that A was Amazon, those F's don't matter. They literally don't matter because the ones that you get right, if you're patient with them, are absolutely positively going to wash away any relevance of the ones that have underperformed.
Yeah. I see Tom Gardner has been posting these things on Twitter over the last couple of days, 1,000%, minus 20%. And then he's saying, oh, you like this portfolio, or like this portfolio. I know what he's trying to communicate. So no, I get it.
And it's hard because all of us went to school. So all of us want to be right all the time.
Yeah.
Right. That's what school teaches us. School teaches us that there is an answer. And if you don't get it, it's because you did something wrong. Right. In investing, you can make really good choices that just don't work out. And you have to have that mentality of I'm going to be, because the only two things that you can control in investing is the company you pick and the price you pay. That's it. You can't control anything after that. And all these people who come on to, who say, well, we pick this because this, and this are going to happen. They're kidding themselves or you or both. And I'm not sure which is worse.
This is really, really precious stuff that you've just talked about, Bill. I hope people hear it. And, this is proven. Motley Fool things have proven with time and again, they've proven it. So, Bill, just one thing. There is a large cap, there is a small cap. Evaluation criteria. How do you zero in on a good small cap? Like top 5 criteria?
So we at the Motley Fool know, looking back over time, that about, in the US at least, that 100% of the stock market gains can be explained by 4% of the companies. And this goes back to the Great Depression, not 2008, 1929. Okay. About 4% of all the companies account for 100% of the gains. So there are certain buckets of areas that we look for pattern recognition. We look for pattern recognition. What companies now have the same exact characteristics that those 4% had over time? Okay. And they really come down to 4 buckets. The first is management and how they are paid. The second is the economics of the business, right? You look for companies that have some kind of pricing power, even if they're not using it. The third is the competitive advantage. And here I think what we look for with small caps in particular, because small caps don't tend to have the same level of competitive advantage. I mean, I described Naked Wines earlier. Naked Wines has a competitive advantage. I think that one of the most important things that you can look for in a small cap is a company that if it disappeared tomorrow, it would be painful for its clients.
Okay.
Right. And a lot of them aren't that way. If a certain retailer disappeared tomorrow, their clients would be at a new retailer tomorrow. Might have to drive a little farther. They might have to, might take a day more for them to get their stuff. They may pay, but it's not painful. Look for small cap companies where it would be painful for their clients if they disappeared. Think about Naked Wines, for example. You don't think about the vintners now who are now building into their models the fact that they get their money months ahead of time. If Naked Wines disappeared, that would be a problem for them.
Okay.
And the fourth area, and this is the hardest one, and it's also where the most magic and mysticism is what we call the DeLorean, which is, it's an homage to the movie Back to the Future, where, Dr. Brown jumps into the car and poof, comes out in the future. And so the DeLorean is in your mind. You get into a time machine and you pop out 10 years from now. What does this business look like? And this is an exercise that you'll never get right. Right. If you look at, I love looking at old predictions. You know, there's a great book called The Book of Predictions that came out in 1980 by a guy named Irving Wallace, where he'd go around and all of these thinkers, you just ask them their predictions. And the only person who said the Soviet Union is going to disappear was a preacher. It was almost by random. Nobody else. And 10 years later, the Soviet Union was gone. So a 10-year prediction is a really audacious thing to demand of yourself. But if you've got some intellectual honesty, you can say, well, I think these are the risks. I think these are the opportunities. I think this is what this management team is thinking about. Right. And Rajiv, there's a beautiful, it used to be that institutional investors had such an advantage of information, you know, because they could go and sit down with managers. One of the beautiful things now is that if you go onto YouTube, any company that you're interested in, and I really mean almost anyone, there are talks given by their CEOs. So you can sit and you can listen to what is important to them. Even if you don't necessarily understand the tech that they're talking about or some of the inputs, and that goes right in your journal, right? So if you do that, you can build up a portfolio, 25, 30 small cap companies, and some of them are going to fail. You're going to be completely wrong about ones, but other ones should give you super A's over time.
One thing, this small cap, let's say, for the safe investors, if they want exposure and they don't want to buy stocks, any ETFs you have in mind?
Caps. I actually think if you're going to buy index, that you really just need to focus on the largest companies, because so many of the smaller companies wash out. It's much higher turnover. It's a much lower hit rate. And the problem with buying a small cap index fund is that the companies that win get traded out. They get moved up to the S&P 500. They get moved up. So you don't get access to, because at one point in time, Netflix was, and Microsoft, they were in the small cap indices, and the people who were owned the small cap indices got 2, 3, 4% of their total, the total gains that they were ever going to get. These are 100 and 1,000 baggers. The place to get that from an index basis is in a large cap index fund.
I think the last question on small cap: what's the weightage you suggest for the small cap in an individual portfolio? I know it's individual preference.
So again, and all that. Right. So if you find yourself, again, we'll go back to my earliest advice, which is write things down. Rajiv, if you find yourself really, really excited when the market drops, your small cap component of your portfolio can be 100% if you want, but you have to have that mindset, right? You have your capacity to suffer has to match your portfolio. If it doesn't, I wouldn't have more than 15% in small caps. And that's not an answer that's very intellectually satisfying, but we're not talking about an intellectual pursuit here. We're talking about having your portfolio match your emotional makeup.